Hello and welcome. Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So it's right at 1 o'clock. I figured we'd go ahead and get started. I do see a few people are still joining, but we have a couple of housekeeping items to get started with first. I just wanted to say hello and welcome to everyone. I'm Sylvia Taylor, Chief Marketing Officer here at ProList. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us for today's webinar on custom kitting and fulfillment. Dimensional marketing has been an emerging trend over the last year or so. It's probably one of the few, really good things to come out of the pandemic and making things a little bit different to reach people. So we are seeing a lot more with fulfillment and kitting and demand for those types of services. So we wanted to present this webinar today. There are certainly lots of moving parts and pieces when it comes to fulfillment and kitting programs. So that's what we'll be covering. And I have Stephanie Ayala, who is an account executive here at ProList with me today, who will be joining and co-presenting. She works extensively with many clients in different industries across the board for their fulfillment needs, their kitting and procurement needs as well. And she brings an extensive background in both the strategic approach to these topics, as well as extensive print, direct mail, direct marketing, and fulfillment expertise. So welcome, Stephanie.
Hi.
Thank you. So without any further ado, we can get started. So the first thing to cover whenever we're talking about fulfillment is to understand some of the basics of the terminology, because fulfillment itself is such a broad term and a really broad topic. I've included a graphic here of what most of us think about when we think of basic fulfillment. We think about ordering something online, probably through an e-commerce site, and then that order going into a management inventory cycle where the items that we've ordered are picked and packed and shipped out, and they get to us at home. And that is a very important part of fulfillment, but it's not the only part of fulfillment. The definition of fulfillment itself is the process of receiving, packaging, and shipping orders. It does have a lot to do with e-commerce, but it also has to do with many other types of fulfillment, a lot of which come under the umbrella of direct marketing. So hand in hand with fulfillment comes kitting. And kitting is the concept of taking different items and combining them into a new combined unit that's ready to ship and to pack and ship out right away. So you'll hear us talk a lot about kitting. That's one of the main topics of our presentation today. And there are lots of different considerations when you're preparing for kitting and shipping of pre-packaged items. The next term you hear a lot of, probably everyone knows this, is pick and pack, selecting individual items for individual orders. And then finally, 3PL, which stands for third-party logistics. Third-party logistics companies' services vary almost as much as what is covered under the term fulfillment. They can be anything from warehousing companies to companies that provide complex inventory management, distribution, and additional services like customer service call centers, printing services, and things like that. So there really is a lot that falls under the umbrella of these terms. And so this slide is one of my favorites because kitting and fulfillment covers a lot of variation, but really what it's ultimately about is getting the items to the recipients on time and the way that they should be packaged and prepared. So I love this image. This kind of shows what the customer experience is. And we all want the customer experience to be fantastic, right? We want the packages to arrive intact and pretty and not beaten up and perfect. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, there are so many different things that have to happen to get to that point, from inventory management and putting items together to packaging things up and shipping them out correctly. There's just a lot that has to happen. So what I like to talk about first with any client or potential client is what is the big picture with the fulfillment program that they are working on. And there are 5 key areas that we like to cover here. The first, going back to that recipient experience. What should the person who is receiving the package get from the experience? Is it simply just delivering something? Say, you receive an item from Amazon. It's not really so much about the packaging, it's getting the item and getting it on time. Whereas for a lot of fulfillment programs, there's a little bit more involved in the recipient experience. That could include anything from a branding experience to wanting to have a takeaway of a certain theme or idea, things like that. Another good starting point is to think about the timeline for the project. This is something that can really vary as well, but it's important to understand how much time do you have in getting this fulfillment program off the ground? Is it something that needs to be done quickly? Are there already products available that need to be distributed? Or is it something that you're starting from scratch with, which will take a little more time to actually procure the items? And another important consideration when you're thinking about the timeline is the delivery. How much time can you allow for delivery? Third is the overall budget. How much do you have to spend? How much of that is allocated towards products? How much is going towards shipping? And then intangibles. When I talk about intangibles, and I know Stephanie's going to talk about this a little bit more as well, those intangibles are what do you want your audience to really gather from the experience with whatever you're sending to them. That could be an introduction to your organization. It could be promoting your brand. It could be ultimately trying to sell them on something. But those are key points that really need to be addressed early on because they can influence everything from what's in the fulfillment package to the actual packaging of the item itself. And then the last and probably most important consideration when you're thinking big picture for fulfillment is what resources do you have? How much are you able to do? How much do you need to rely on a 3PL provider? Do you want to be working with lots of different individuals handling different pieces of the puzzle, or are you really looking for a one-stop shop to sort of be able to do everything for you? And that's a consideration that, I think needs to come up early. A lot of times maybe it doesn't, and that's what makes these packages kind of difficult, is because it is pretty easy to get overtaxed with trying to get them all organized. Wouldn't you agree, Stephanie?
Yep, definitely. A lot of hands make things a lot harder sometimes.
That is very true. Okay, so I'm going to let Stephanie jump in here a little bit about once you kind of have the main considerations under your belt, the next step is really developing the purpose and the theme of your campaign.
So with purpose and theme, with kits all around, there's just so many different options and purposes that these kits can literally fulfill for your individual project, or if it's a certain incentive program, or even if it's just to gain new donors, or even just to reward your current donors. There's just so many things that these kits can ideally do. So there's just such a wide range of things, even with events. Now that everyone, as people are still hosting, obviously, virtual events. So if you want to, instead of having, what you would normally get as your in-person, swag bag or little kit or, little things here and there, we can now mail those to your attendees for your events. And then even for your in-person events, if you're thinking long-term, maybe in the next 6 to 12 months, you think that you're going to be, you know, ready and able to go ahead and host some in-person events, we can start gathering stuff for these in-person events as well. And then aside from that, in other verticals like nonprofits and organizations, we can do these donor retention kits, like I just mentioned before, just touching on, you know, either getting new donors, again, influencing current donors. Maybe there's a new initiative that you're trying to push within the organization. Those are all things that we could definitely gear the kits towards as well. And then just overall an organization. I mean, we've gone through some pretty, you know, unexpected, crazy times over the past year. So just, I would say maybe giving your employees, you know, a little something, a little thank you for, you know, getting through for the past year. Just so many different things that we could ideally, you know, put these boxes together for that. The options are literally limitless. And I think that's also what makes the whole kitting process a little bit stressful at times, just because you need to kind of narrow down your ideas to one specific thing and one specific theme. Is what we're going to talk about now. Next is just try to think about maybe what your theme is going to be for your kit, whether maybe it's for the next upcoming month, it's going to be a summer fun type of kit that you want to send out to your employees. And the next couple of months, we're going to be thinking about, you know, back to school, so we can theme something around that. Or even something about, you know, being out and about and being, you know, healthy and active and more wellness related. So thinking of a theme related to your kit will definitely help narrow down what we're going to center the whole purpose of your kit in your initiative and putting something like this together.
Perfect. That's very true. And we've seen all sorts of different themes.
Yes.
The sky's the limit when it comes to themes. So,
and then I guess we're going to talk about some of the details. So details in the kitting process is definitely something that, I mean, obviously there's just so many options, like we've said already quite a few times, and just coming up with, you know, what specific items you want to put into your kit. Figuring out if you want your items to be branded versus non-branded. There's certain, you know, companies that want everything to be branded with a logo or, you know, their tagline for their specific event or, you know, whatever that is. So then you have to think about, do you want some of your items branded or do you want all of your items branded? Or there's sometimes that people don't want anything specifically branded to the company because you just want maybe just to provide either a really nice beach towel and you don't want your logo to be on it. You just want your employee to have a nice beach towel. Mm-hmm. And then you also have to just think about what the actual purpose is of the items that you're putting together into the kit. Do you want them to be able to be used maybe over the next couple, you know, maybe a couple times, or do you want them to have a longer shelf life? Do you want them to, you know, keep them as, you know, maybe like a keepsake type of item, or do you want it to be displayed in their office somewhere or on their desk? Or something that's going to remind them of, you know, that gift that you provided them, you know, at whatever time it was that you provided that gift. But there's just so many other things that you can kind of think in regards to the actual items that we're putting together for the kit. And then any of the other type of collaterals or takeaways. So if you're going to add in like a personalized card, or if you want to add in a little note, or again, like a thank you to your employees, you know, for sticking it out with you for the past year or something like that. And then just touching on packaging very briefly, there's so many options, and we'll get into the actual options for packaging, but there's just so many options when it comes to actually packaging your kits. And then just thinking of more the functionality of the kit and the packaging of the box versus, are we going to have, well, your idea is going to be that your recipient is going to keep the box as more of like a keepsake because it's just so beautiful they don't want to throw it away because it's not a plain brown corrugated box type of thing. So these are all things that we can think of and how we put in there. It's the beauty or the beast. So something really pretty or something just, you know, more of on the function side of it.
Exactly. And we're going to talk a little bit more about packaging in just a few slides here because the options are varied.
Now we can talk about the actual kit.
That's right. We're going to talk about the actual kit contents. So the first stop after you've kind of gotten the big picture planning pieces out of the way, established a theme, kind of thought about the types of items that you want, is the process of procuring the actual items to go into the kits. As anyone who's probably already done this before, it can seem a little overwhelming when you go down that rabbit hole of, looking out there and there are millions of products and a lot of different places to get them, and then trying to figure out the pricing and where things are coming from and timelines and things like that. It's really a little more complicated than I think most people give it credit for right off the bat. But when you're sourcing these items, there are a couple key considerations that you're going to want to think of as far as the items themselves and where they're coming from. And the first is the origination of the items, because that's an important question to ask. A lot of items are here in the United States, but an awful lot of them also come from China and other places outside of the country. And that can really impact the timeline and sometimes the cost as well. So that's one of the things that you would want to keep in mind, as well as this is another one that comes up a lot, which is there a minimum order quantity? There are some items that you can get, 1, 2, 5, 10 of. It's not a big deal, but there are a lot of other items. And when you're comparing them, it's important to compare, what the minimum quantity is that's required, because some may have 500 or 1,000 pieces and say you only need 50 or 100. That's gonna pretty much rule out that product, and you'll have to find a similar one. The other thing to be on the lookout for are hidden costs, because it's more of a la carte approach with a lot of these items, and how they're personalized and branded based on things like, do you need a proof? Do you need a second color? How are they going to be personalized? Are they going to be embroidered or screen printed? Things like that can add additional costs. And it just kind of adds up, as well as shipping, especially if they're coming from a long distance. So those are also all important. And then the turn times are basically a function of all of those constraints. So my biggest recommendation is to, find a promotional partner who can really do a lot of the legwork for you on this. This will allow you can ask for samples of items if you need to compare quality. And that person is really a resource as far as finding the most reliable suppliers, because every now and then it happens that there's a large fulfillment order, and we did see this a lot, some with the pandemic, of orders being held up and not being able to get out of China to get to the United States. So that did impact a few of our clients. So that's just another reason to have that partner in there to sort of be able to work through those situations, as well as the quality considerations. They're all super important. So let's just take a look at, so there are so many different items to choose from. I don't know, Stephanie, did you want to add some here about your comments on promotional items?
Yeah, I would say with promotional items, like you said, there's just so many options and so many variations to even obviously something as simple as a pen. There's probably thousands of options for a pen. But when I'm speaking to my clients directly, I'll ask them, I like to present to them as like a good, better, best option. Like, where would you be? Or do you want me to provide you a good, better, best option for, let's say, if they were looking for a coffee mug? Or if they have something in mind, maybe on a specific shape or a specific color that they're looking for, and then doing something like that, providing them, price points, or if they already have a price point in mind that they would ideally like to spend on a per piece, then I like to obviously kind of work backwards in providing them, certain options for promotional products, just because if you go online and you just start searching, you could spend hours literally looking at stuff that you would specifically want to purchase. So I think kind of trying to narrow it down to either a certain price point, or also the turnaround times that you said. If you have a quicker, if you don't have that much time in order to wait for certain things to to arrive, then obviously we need to look at options that are going to be here in the US.
Yes, that is very true and very important. So now we're going to back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about packaging, which we touched on before, but packaging is the next big consideration kind of after, you've decided what items you want and you're working with a partner to kind of procure those items for you. Packaging is a big consideration. It really makes a difference in terms of the presentation of your kit or your fulfillment item. And sometimes it can be a little hard to visualize how the packaging plays into it because you don't have the packaging available, right? It's very conceptual, and that makes it a little bit tougher. So, I like to think of, do you want it to go in a box? Do you want it to go in a bag? Or do you want it to go in something else like a padded mailer? And a lot of that selection for the packaging is going to be based on, the theme and the intrinsic value that we talked about earlier of what this packaged item and what this experience is going to be, as well as the functionality. If it's something that's breakable, obviously you're going to need a box. If it's something that is a little bit lightweight or maybe a little more flexible, you might be able to get away with a poly bag, but is that really the presentation that you want? So those are the kinds of considerations. The other thing is the cost. There's a wide variety of costs out there in terms of, a few cents for a plastic mailer up to, it's probably easy to pay $15 or $20 for a custom printed, kind of like a Hallmark takeaway box. So it really runs the gamut there. And one of the things I always point out to clients that I'm working with is, what is the time value proposition? How much time are you willing to allow for custom packaging in terms of procuring it? And what is the value going to be to the kit itself? So we do ship out a lot of fulfillment projects here that just go in standard, brown corrugated boxes. That's a perfectly acceptable option. And they can be livened up. This is where being creative and thinking about customized ways to kind of elevate that box without going down the whole custom printed option, by adding things like labels and stickers and colored things like that. So there are a lot of different options. The other one is the box within a box. And this even has come up here with some of the promotions we've planned, is that it's, you might have an inner box and it's really nice and you don't want it to get damaged. So you use an outer box as well. So a box within a box. And Stephanie, I know that some of your clients have done that as well. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially for the clients that go down the custom box route where you're paying, it could be up to, $15, like you said, for a custom box. Of course, you don't want that custom box to, be all beat up, mangled, and dented, and once it actually arrives to your recipient. So we want to make sure that we protect that, really beautiful box that we've created within another shipping box, which at that point would be your plain, brown corrugated box, just to protect the actual integrity of that beautifully custom designed box. And then even with that, there's also other options that you can, that custom box could also go into one of the poly bags or even one of the bubble mailers, just depending on size at that point. But the box within the box, definitely, it sounds a little crazy, but it definitely serves its purpose.
It does, and we do see it a lot, especially when you just want to really protect things, right? It definitely makes that difference there. So speaking about things that make a difference, this is probably the most frequently overlooked or kind of like last minute detail in a majority of fulfillment projects or kits. And that is, what is the fill going to be in there? What do you need some extra materials in there? That could be tissue paper, that could be crinkle paper, that could be bubble wrap. And then we really go down into the details of how that filler material needs to be placed? Does it need to be wrapped around something? Does it need to be sealed with a sticker or gold foil sticker or something like that? And then for crinkle paper and that type of filler, that sounds crazy, but you really have to think about how much do you want? Do you just want it on the bottom? Do you want it on the sides? Do you want it on the top? Is it just there for a decorative purpose? Is it there to actually stabilize the items? You know, you don't want your items in your kit or your fulfillment package to move around that much during the journey, and they're going to be shipped. So the whole point of that is to be able to make it stabilizing, but also, you know, beautiful and enhancing as well. And speaking of enhancement, Stephanie, what else would you recommend as far as the little details that can make a difference?
I would say mostly the enhancements kind of just take your packaging kind of up to the next level in a lot of different ways, like the stickers that you mentioned. I know that for a specific client that we had in regards to they were mailing out books. So what we did was actually put tissue paper around the books just to protect the actual book once it goes into the mailer box, and then we seal it with a gold sticker just to kind of, again, for the illusion of it looking beautiful in the sense when you open that box. It just takes it up a step. I mean, it's all things, of course, that you don't think about when you're thinking about mailing out a book. But it's just little things that kind of all come together to really make a good impression to your recipient. And then the labels. I know that a lot of times we've used labels for the actual outer shipping boxes that we're printing either your logo, it could be even just, you know, the tagline of your specific event that we're putting together these kits for. And we'll just go ahead and print those labels or stickers, and we'll put them right on the outside of the shipping box. So you don't have just the actual shipping label, whether it's a USPS label or a FedEx label. You actually have something that will help your recipient recognize that the box is coming from you or your event or what it is. I mean, it also kind of helps create the excitement of what's inside the box. So, and then aside from that, I guess we've kind of some of the other personalized printed elements and adding package inserts to, again, like Sylvia said, to keep your stuff from not moving. And when they actually open the box, everything is kind of where it's supposed to be. So all of those things are just little enhancements that, of course, we don't think about when we're initially thinking about putting together these kits, but they're all little things that definitely matter in the actual end result of your kit.
Perfect. Yes, they're very important. And then just to kind of show some variation in the types of kits and the packaging, we've got a couple examples here of a box within a box. The Marketing Made Better box is actually one that we printed and produced here at ProList. So that's kind of an idea of custom packaging. That could even be personalized. That would then go in an outer box to protect it and then ship. And then on the other hand, you have some other packages that really don't have any filler. And then, you know, another one that does have a significant amount of crinkle paper in there. But Stephanie, do you have any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think it's just good to keep in mind when you say, "Oh, we want crinkle paper." Sometimes there's such a wide range of what we want crinkle paper to what we think to what you think, and we obviously want to make sure that you're happy with the end result of your kit. So, kind of discussing, you know, how much crinkle paper or whatever we're putting in to stuff the box, whether it's tissue paper, in another sense, but it's just the actual visual of the box. So another thing that just in the end all, I guess, look of the box.
Exactly. And yeah, these are just things you're going to want to make sure to have a list of questions to be able to ask about these kinds of things. And it's easier if they're addressed up front versus later on down the road. So now moving on to the topic of 3PL shipping and delivery. Shipping is a really important aspect of any fulfillment program. And some of the shipping options, of course, will depend on the volume that you're doing, but also there are some very basic sort of questions and considerations to ask, or ask your clients if you're doing a project for them, to ask these up front, because it's going to narrow down your options pretty quickly. And the first is, do you need your shipping to be trackable or not? If it needs to be tracked and you need to be able to know where that package is, then that is going to sort of take you on a different direction as far as the types of services that are offered, either through the United States Postal Service or with private service carriers like FedEx or UPS. Then the next question is what you're shipping time sensitive, or is there a hard deadline date? For example, a virtual event date or a conference date, or, you know, something that these packages have to be in hand by. That's also going to make a big difference as far as what type of shipping method you select. And then the next is, are you shipping just domestic, or do you have international shipments? Because if you have international shipments, you're going to want to ask your 3PL service provider some very specific questions about the rates for shipping to the individual countries, as well as things like, you know, there are certain items that can't be shipped. You know, you really probably want to have someone who's knowledgeable with international shipping to be able to kind of walk through that scenario, especially if you have a large volume. If it's just one or two packages, you know, going, that's not a big of a deal. But if it's several thousand, that really becomes a key consideration. Then overall with shipping is the importance of cost. There are some, you know, lower cost parcel shipping options that the Postal Service Postal Service offers. The USPS has actually been focusing on expanding their package services offerings. It seems that it's a better, you know, service area even than mail. So they have really ramped up and supported that side of things. So those are definitely options there. They're a little lower cost a lot of the time. And then another question to ask your provider is, do they have programs? Do they have, you know, discounts available through their different shipping logistics providers? And can you take advantage of those rates? Because a lot of times, because they're logistics companies, we're shipping a lot, the rates are going to be a little lower. And also for someone who's knowledgeable with the Postal Service offerings, of course, with anything Postal Service, there's lots of ins and outs as far as being able to qualify and take advantage of those discounted parcel services. And then just to kind of finish up with shipping, so for the Postal Service, they have package services, both first class and ground. Of course, first class, there will be, you know, delivery times on there that are much shorter. Ground can take a little bit longer, between 5 and 15 days. But this is especially important for those nonprofit clients. There are some really, really inexpensive nonprofit parcel rates out there. Of course, there are minimum numbers of pieces, and there are things like you have to have a barcode on there that allows you to take advantage of the discounts. But there's Parcel Select, there's Parcel Select Lightweight, there's bound printed matter. There's other things like media mail and library mail, which are utilized less frequently, but there are a lot of different programs that the Postal Service offers for fulfillment shipping that is really pretty inexpensive. The alternative to that is to go with a logistics provider that works with one of the private carriers. Here at ProList, we work with FedEx. We have a great relationship with them. They offer a lot of different products. So when you're specifying to your fulfillment partner that you want to ship something FedEx, be sure to go down the list of what FedEx programs they specifically offer, because there's a lot of different options. So there's a lot of different cost variation in those. Using something like SmartPost, which actually is a hybrid program. It's a program of FedEx, but actually the Postal Service carries out the delivery, is a really great option, especially for large fulfillment programs where you can cut the cost significantly and still have a great delivery rate. And then there's also something called a one rate program, which FedEx offers to larger organizations, 3PL providers, where if packages meet certain dimensional and weight requirements, they ship for the same rate domestically, no matter where they're going. And then there's, of course, also ground and priority, but those are going to be a little more expensive and might not actually be the best option for some of the larger fulfillment distributions. So just a lot to keep in mind. Be sure to ask a lot of questions, get your service provider or partner to provide you with a couple of different options and different price ranges. I think Stephanie and I would both agree that that's probably the best way to approach that, to just see what the differences are and then make a decision from there. So that brings us to our final slide here. I know we're running just a little bit long, but we'll wrap it up shortly. I want to ask you, Stephanie, to run through your 10 key considerations as far as selecting a fulfillment partner.
Sure. So I think that when you're going to, decide that you're going to move forward with one of these fulfillment jobs or requests, that you're going to go ahead and think of these 10 things. One, that whoever you choose as your fulfillment partner obviously has an extensive amount of industry experience, just because there's always so many questions, in the beginning. I feel like beginning, middle to end, I feel like you always have a bunch of questions, just because I feel like a lot of companies now that are going through these fulfillment programs, it's new to them. So it's new. We all have questions, and your fulfillment partner should have answers for you. And then obviously someone that's geographically convenient to you definitely helps a lot. And then proven track record with existing clients. You want to obviously make sure that your fulfillment partner has good experiences to share with some of the other clients, and even just to throw out suggestions or give you ideas maybe that you might have in regards to your project. And then someone that offers scalability is definitely important. You want your partner also to be financially sound. Excellent industry references, which is, that speaks for itself, having a good track record. And then just strong logistic relationships in all essences of the word. And then someone that's obviously transparent with you in case there is a problem, which we all don't want to hear that, or there's an issue with this, or we have a question with this, or something got held up, or even with shipping sometimes if it's a promotional product. We want to make sure that whoever you're working with is going to be upfront and honest with you, and try to figure out how to solve the problem, as opposed to trying to figure it out and not say anything, and then don't hit deadlines, and then no one is happy. And then obviously provides adequate technology and systems in order to make sure that your whole order is processed properly. Fulfillment systems, online support, so that everyone is knowledgeable about what's going on, both behind the scenes, and you with knowing exactly where your project is as well. And then any of the other integrative supporting systems is very important as well. Someone that has the whole, all the capabilities that you might need during your project. So printing services, mailing services, being able to scout your promotional items and items is definitely helpful. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop, and you have one person dealing with your project as opposed to 5 different people asking you questions. Having one specific person that you're dealing with every single day makes life a lot easier.
Yes, those are all great points. I just have 2 that I would add. The first would be, this kind of speaks to the scalability, but you really want to make sure that whoever you're using for your fulfillment partner has some flexibility with their space, as far as what their utilization rate is, how much space they have, can they just absorb, 100 or 200 skids of material? That is a really, really important question. As well as asking to take a look inside the facility. That either means if it's close, you could possibly visit, or just asking for, a brief virtual tour. You just want to make sure that it's, an organization that has a dedicated fulfillment space. It's not just someone who's maybe doing it in a, in a corner somewhere. So I always mention those two things, as being questions I would ask out there. But all very important, all very good. And that brings us to the conclusion. I know we have a couple minutes left. I did have two questions that came in during the presentation, and the first was about budget. What should I commonly budget for a basic fulfillment package? That's kind of a tough question, but when you take into consideration, the items that are going to be in the package, depending on what you put in there, if you're going with something that's kind of a lower value, you're not going for any really fancy packaging or something like that, and some basic shipping, I would say probably at least $12 to $15. I think it would be really tough to do anything for less than that. $20 to $25 is probably more realistic to put together a nice themed kit or fulfillment project. But of course, the sky's the limit. It could probably go up to several $100s if you'd like. I mean, Stephanie, what do you think? What are you seeing on that?
I would say the same thing. I mean, I think there's so many variations of how extensive or, how much money each individual company wants to invest in these kits. So, I mean, yeah, you have your $10, $12 kits. And I mean, I have some that are, definitely in the hundreds range. So it just depends.
Yes, a lot of variation there. Then the next question was, how long does it take? How long does it take to pull off one of these, either a kit or just establishing a new fulfillment program with a vendor? At the minimum, I would say a comfortable time frame is 4 to 6 weeks. I know if the items are readily available and they're just coming and it's just for basically kitting and labeling and shipping out, we can definitely do things quicker. But a lot of it depends on answering those questions up front about where your products coming from, what kind of packaging do you need, what kind of shipping do you need. So I would say in the 4 to 6 weeks. So Stephanie, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say it definitely, if you're going the custom box route, I would definitely think on the 6 to 8 week mark, just because boxes definitely take longer. But if you have everything, I would say, available, and it's just getting everything to us and packaging, I mean, 2-3 weeks, hitting certain deadlines and making sure that everyone is very responsive for approvals, it could definitely be done. But I would say comfortably, just to give yourself enough time, I would say anywhere from, 4 to 6 weeks is definitely a good timeline.
Okay. I figured at least that long. I mean, I feel like it would be nice to start planning, 6 months ahead, especially for some items that might be difficult to get, but I know that's not always realistic. So, well, that concludes our presentation today. Thank you for joining us. For more information, you can always visit our website. We do also have an area on the site where you can browse all sorts of different promotional products and take a look at pricing there, request samples, request information. We will take care of all that for you. If you have one-off questions or questions about any projects that you have coming up, please don't hesitate to email either Stephanie or I, and you will receive a link with the recording for the session as well as the presentation itself. So thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Bye, thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.